Hello and welcome everybody to ICMDA webinars. I'm Dr. Peter Saunders, the Chief Executive of the International Christian Medical and Dental Association, which brings together about 60,000 Christian doctors and dentists from over 100 affiliated movements worldwide. And today's webinar is on the subject of training Christians on end-of-life issues. So it's a great pleasure for me to introduce Brad MacKinnon. And Brad is working with the CMDA, the Christian Medical and Dental Association of Canada, and I'll say a little bit more about him shortly. But Dying with Christ, Living with Hope is a faith-based program designed by CMDA to equip churches and communities to respond thoughtfully on end-of-life issues, including the growing expansion of euthanasia, what they euphemistically call MAiD, medical assistance in dying, in Canada, where, of course, it is legal. The course that Brad's going to talk to us about combines medical, ethical, theological, and pastoral perspectives, helping participants explore what it means to live and die in the hope of Christ. And through structured sessions, discussion and reflection, it offers both education and spiritual formation. Participants gain a deeper understanding of suffering, palliative care, and Christian teaching on life and death, while being empowered to accompany others with compassion, truth, and pastoral sensitivity. So really what we're aiming to do today is to help you as Christian doctors and dentists to be able to speak more effectively in your churches and train others, and quite possibly using this course, which we'll tell you more about later. So Brad MacKinnon is MA. He serves as the campaign manager for Christian Medical and Dental Association in Canada, which is our affiliated group there, headed up by Larry Worthen. And Brad's work includes national advocacy, conscience protection, public presentations, and the development of media and resources to help churches speak credibly about the expansion of euthanasia in Canada. Brad also leads training for facilitators of CMDA Canada's program Dying with Christ and Living with Hope. With more than 20 years of experience in pastoral ministry, Brad now equips physicians, pastors, and community members to foster a Christian understanding of death and hope at the grassroots level. He's based in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. He tells me he's just a few minutes' walk from the Atlantic Ocean. There, we hope he won't be wandering off during this webinar to enjoy the sights. And he is part of CMDA Canada's national office team as well. And I think there are a few groups in the whole ICMDA network who have more experience in advocating on the issue of euthanasia and assisted suicide than CMDA Canada, because of the situation that they find themselves in legally in that country. So Brad, it's such a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for making the time to join us. We really look forward to hearing what you have to say and to interacting with you in the Q&A later. So, dear brother, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter, and thank you for having me. As Peter mentioned, my name is Brad MacKinnon, and I work for CMDA Canada, the Christian Medical and Dental Association of Canada. We're about 1,600 Christian doctors and dentists from all across Canada who seek to integrate faith into practice. We seek to integrate the practice of medicine with gospel values. In an increasingly secular environment, especially like Canada, being Christian is becoming challenging. And part of that challenge is representing Christ in the world through our words and our deeds. And it is becoming ever more necessary to give that tremendous witness. The image on screen here is from a recent publication from the United States called The Atlantic, and the title of the article was "Canada is Killing Itself." We are intentionally need to talk about these difficult topics, and unfortunately, we in Canada are at that forefront. As many of you may be aware, Canada has legalized euthanasia, which we have a local term for it called medical assisted in dying, more practically known as MAiD. And it has become increasingly normalized in our country. According to Canada's 6th annual MAiD report, which came out in December of 2025, which represents all of our statistics up to and including 2024, 5.1% of all deaths in Canada are now caused by MAiD. That percentage is even higher in certain regions such as Quebec and British Columbia. This is no longer a fringe issue. This is a cultural shift with enormous moral, ethical, and spiritual consequences. While there is a great deal of bad news here, I actually believe there is a real opportunity for Christians to respond in faith. Not only in Canada, but anywhere where euthanasia is expanding. From my background in 20 years of church ministry, one thing has become very clear to me. You don't change culture by reacting to the symptoms. You need to deal with what is going on in front of you. The article I have here is about a lady named Sophia. We only know that as her identity is hidden. Sophia was a lady who suffered from multiple chemical sensitivities and couldn't find adequate public housing. Her friends tried to GoFundMe to help her, and they could not receive enough funds. In the end, Sophia chose medical assistance in dying, and it became a national story. One of our national networks, CTV News, picked it up, and it became a national debate for a short period of time, but nothing really changed. I'm going to give you more of a medical example. When you are dealing with a patient, you don't simply treat the symptoms. You want to restore them to full health. In order to do that, you have to find the underlying condition, the thing that is driving what's actually going on. And when it comes to euthanasia, the root issue is not legalization alone. It is not legislation or a particular political party. It is how we understand death, suffering, dignity, and hope. We have removed Christ from culture, and the expansion of euthanasia is a symptom of a sick culture, one that desperately needs Jesus. Jesus is the only cure to this problem. That means we need to begin a conversation about a topic that is deeply taboo in much of our culture and in many of our homes. When we talk about death, we often do so reluctantly, if at all. Death is hidden. Death is something that is pushed to the margins and only discussed in moments of crisis. And yet, death is one of the few certainties that we all share. For Christians, death is not simply an ending. It is a passage from one life to the next. It is the fulfillment of the promises of Jesus. It is the moment where faith, hope, and love are tested most deeply, and when the promises of Christ matter the most. Dying with Christ, living with hope was created to help Christians recover a faithful, hopeful, and deeply human experience of death, dying, and end of life. In fact, you might even say a deeply Christian experience of life. At a time when these questions have become increasingly urgent, not just in Canada, but around the world. And believe it or not, as I've talked about this topic, I think there's a lot of good news. In recent years, our society has undergone profound changes in its understanding of suffering, dignity, and death. As euthanasia has expanded, many people, including Christians, are asking very difficult questions. What does it mean to die well? How should Christians undergo suffering? What is the responsibility we have to those who are dying? And where does hope fit into this discussion? This program doesn't avoid any of these questions. Our approach is not to have a political debate or teach abstract theology, but a pastoral and spiritual realities grounded in Scripture. and our lived experiences. This is what's at the core of dying with Christ, living with hope, reminding us of a central Christian truth, that Christ redeemed the world through his death, his life, death, and resurrection. Through his suffering, he gives us all hope, and that we are called to follow him, not only in this life, but through death as well, and hopefully into the resurrection. Before I explain the program in more details, I want to show you a short sample of the program. This is our 3-minute trailer, and I believe this is the best way to give you an experience, and it has one of my favorite lines in the whole series. So, allow me to share this audio.
If I had to pick one word to describe death, the word would probably be meaningful or significant.
For me, one word that I would think of when I think about death and dying is trust.
I think the word that comes to mind the most for me is opportunity. We have an opportunity, if we're the patient, of showing our trust in the Lord, of allowing people to care for us, of working through things that we've had a hard time with in our whole lives, and having some healing.
If I had to, and if we're talking from a Christian perspective, I think Jesus does give one image that is useful. He talks about, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But when it does fall into the earth and die, it bears much fruit. And so there is this element of the sadness, of the loss, the privation, etc. But it does bear fruit. And I think, if that image perhaps highlights maybe the merciful aspect of death a bit more, that's probably because the Christian tradition holds on to the hope that death is not the end, and the suffering, the loss that we experience, as real and as horrible as it is ultimately outweighed or eclipsed by the weight of glory that the Christian hope promises.
The fact that Canada now has medical assistance in dying legislation that allows physicians the ability to end a patient's life who are either near the end of life or suffering some kind of illness that they see as intolerable. It's to me, it's a sad reflection upon the fact that we have put so much emphasis upon suffering as taking away from a human's identity, a human's dignity, as a person created in God's image.
But I think we need to be bringing the discussion of what it means to have a good death into our homes. We need to be thinking about having a good model for our children and our grandchildren about what it means to have a good life. And a good life also includes some of what in the past was called ars moriendi, the art of dying.
One of the great tragedies, I think, of the modern world, and indeed it's a tragedy of my life, is that I've been involved in the church for pretty much all my life, and I've never had any training in how to die. I've never had any real instruction in how to die.
That last line that Dr. Dean says always gets me. Just like Dr. Dean, I too did not think much about death and dying until I was forced to. And I think that's true for many of us. In my late 20s, I had 3 friends that died within the course of 4 months. And it was at that point that I was forced to confront my own beliefs about what death and dying was and why some people suffer and others don't. And I only wish I had a program like Dying with Christ, Living with Hope, so that I could have explored these topics. In this program, it's a video-based program designed for churches and parishes and faith-based communities. And each session has 2 theologians, 3 Christian palliative care doctors, and 1 Christian palliative care nurse. There's no medical or theological requirement to take these courses. It creates a safe space to have thoughtful conversations, even around topics that we may find uncomfortable. It's designed so that even people who may have differing opinions from the Christian perspective on death and dying can enter into these conversations and look into what they believe. Session 1, we focus on death and dying. It helps participants name their fears and assumptions and reframe death not as a failure or an ending, but as part of the Christian journey, grounded in resurrection hope. Session 2, we address suffering, pain, and end of life. It explores things like palliative care, Christian moral teaching, and the difference between relieving suffering and intentionally ending a human life. Remaining pastoral, but also looking at the issues head on. Session 3 focuses on the Christian duty of care. It reminds us that care for the dying is not only something that the medical community has a role to play. It is a Christian calling that we all have a role to play based on our individual gifts. The church and individuals are invited to rediscover how to accompany people through the dying process with compassion and dignity. Across all 3 videos, we emphasize not fear, but formation. We give people hope. So this is kind of how it works, and I wanted to get into some of the practicalities. Each week, the program follows us an intentional rhythm. We begin with a short, clear ecumenical prayer, followed by a brief introduction that comes directly from our workbooks. The workbooks give us a little opening line, and then the introvert's favorite part, 5 minutes of quiet with one reflection question. People can either jot down or prayerfully reflect upon the question. We then have the video. It's between 20 and 25 minutes each week. And each video allows an open discussion, similar to the format you saw in the trailer. And then we head into small groups, which is the heart of these conversations. People have 3 questions that they can enter into over 30 minutes. And the purpose of the questions is not simply to ensure that you get the right answers. It's to create discussion. And the main thing we emphasize with the small group leaders is that they don't need to have all the answers. In fact, we encourage them not to have the answers. They jot down the questions and bring them back to the large group. And in the large group, questions can be answered. And if they can't be answered by the facilitator, week 2, we encourage to have a medical professional, preferably a doctor or a nurse, to come in and answer some of those medical questions that come up naturally during that second week. And in the third week, we encourage somebody with a theological background, whether that's a pastor or maybe somebody that you have at a local school or somebody with a background in this kind of ethic that can talk adequately about it. And maybe even, especially if it's the pastor, begin to have a conversation about what we as a local church are going to do in response to some of the challenges the video raises. How do we journey and guide with people? At the end of each week, there is a small reflection that is at the end that you can use as a meditation. It has a great question. There's closing prayer. And then the book itself has a lot of good resources in it from different traditions and from different backgrounds, both books, audio, visual. And at the end, it's important to always say thank you to the ladies who put out the sandwiches and make the coffee. And if you're doing it online, your tech support team, thank you to Josh, who's working in the background right now, helping me out get through this. It's always important to thank those people who are doing those important roles. This is designed to have an honest and ongoing discussion. And the thing that makes this program different is that we don't really rush to answers. Instead, we create a reflective space, a very prayerful space to reconnect with this conversation, with the conversation around the Christian story about redemption and hope. And it bridges the gap that many churches feel between theology and lived experience, between faith and medicine, between personal preparation and communal responsibility. It helps us to rediscover what earlier generations would have called the art of dying. The truth is, as I've traveled with the executive director of CMDA Canada, Larry Worthen, who speaks extensively on this topic and is currently developing a resource called What's Wrong with MAiD, which is the title of his presentation that he does all over Canada. And it's one that we've become in such a high demand that we've decided to create a video resource to go along with it. The reality is this: many people in our country simply do not know what's happening. They don't understand how euthanasia has profoundly reshaped medical ethics and impacted healthcare, how it has had a huge impact on the relationship between physicians and patients, how it has damaged the therapeutic relationship between physicians and patients. When people learn these facts, there is often shock and awe. And I hope that as I'm sharing this with you as medical professionals, that you can find some solace in knowing that it's not that the general populace doesn't care about what's going on. They're just mostly unaware of the effect that euthanasia has had on the medical profession. And it should be, I hope, a sign of hope for you that there is something that we can do. So you might be wondering, well, who is this program for? It is for everyone. It's run in churches or small groups, whether that's in parishes or other church locations. It's great for adult education or formation settings. Pastoral care teams at churches have used it as a part of their formation for their ministry. Healthcare professionals have used it as a way to have these discussions inside of their own study groups. Lay leaders have used this to be something that they can do. We've even had it run in nursing homes where people who are closer to the end of life can have these discussions. Anyone who wants to think more deeply about this topic, about death, suffering, and hope, it's designed for them. And it has been run across denominations, and it resonates particularly with people who are caring for aging families, members, facing serious illness, and feeling unsettled about the cultural shifts around end of life.
Sure.
One of the things we've realized is that we couldn't just make a program. Making a program was never enough. We needed to have ongoing training. And as Peter indicated, that's one of my roles, is that I resource people so they can run it. Churches are very busy places. Pastors are stretched thin. I'm sure that's something that many of the doctors on this call can relate to. And so we needed to equip the people who are going to run this course to have all of the materials that they would need. So this program could be run by anyone. And we run ongoing training pretty much every month so that people can learn how to run this program, and it doesn't add any administrative burden to already busy clergy. We also provide a full facilitator's set of resources, including slides, outlines, how to schedule the events, how to set up registration, small group leader notes and training, promotional materials. We have a video for each session. The videos have been subtitled in French. We have workbooks in both English and French, and we offer ongoing coaching and support. Part of my day, every day, is that I'm usually on either a phone call or a Zoom call or through email communicating with somebody who is running this program somewhere in Canada, and a couple of people who have run it internationally. One of our dreams and hopes for this year is that we are going to refilm the videos in French. Given the growth of MAiD in Quebec, which is, if Quebec was its own country, has the highest rate of euthanasia anywhere in the world. So we want to resource our French brothers and sisters to have everything that they need. Dying with Christ, Living with Hope was a production of the Christian Medical and Dental Association of Canada. This is a fellowship of Christian doctors and dentists who are committed to integrating gospel values into the practice of medicine. And we have been running this program now for about 3 years. The first year was the beta year, the test year. And through the generous support of our members and the public at large, we've been able to have almost 2,000 people, 1,900 and counting, experience this program. And the program has been run 50 times in every province and territory across Canada. And a few international groups have become interested in New Zealand, England, and the United States, as well as our first international course took place in early December in upstate New York. And we have groups taking the course in Michigan and Illinois in the coming weeks. The dates and times on the screen are the next season of courses. And we run those online over Zoom, similar to the way that we're experiencing this today. One of the other unique things about this program is that it is completely funded by donation. The original videos were funded by a donation from a very generous Christian donor who saw what was going on in Canada and wanted to resource a group and thought that CMDA was uniquely positioned for that. And we continue to fund the program by asking people to make $10 donations when they use the program per participant. And sometimes we mail books out to churches, and some churches are unable to reimburse us for that. But it always seems to work out, because then the next church seems to give us twice as much. And ultimately, the program doesn't exist to make money. We're grateful when we can pay the bills. However, it exists for one reason: to help Christians face death without fear or despair, to rediscover faith and hope. Because we have learned that dying with Christ truly means living with hope. And to help Christians face death without fear or despair and with courage and hope is the goal. Because we want to learn how to die with Christ so that we can live with him forever. I want to thank ICMDA for inviting me here today, and I will be sticking around to answer any questions, and hopefully I can find all the answers you need. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brad. And amazing how to see how this is spreading, not just around Canada, across all the provinces and territories, but also all around the world as well. And we've got time for question and answer now. So, Brad, first of all, I'd be interested to know, you say you've run this right across Canada, all the provinces and territories. You've had over almost 2,000 people have attended. It's got an online version as well as an in-person version. What sort of feedback are you getting from people afterwards? I mean, how are you wanting people to be impacted by it, and what kind of feedback are you getting from attendees in terms of changing the way that they're relating to or to this issue for themselves and talking to others about it?
I think one of the most challenging things has been the fact that we get lots of people who disagree, and that would not have been my original assumption. I originally experienced the course in my pastoral work, and Larry came and facilitated one at my church. And I had somebody in my own small group who was a committed Christian who I saw every Sunday, who was a nurse, and she was outside of the Christian message on this. She was okay with euthanasia and abortion, and she ended up having a profound experience in our small group and changed her mind. But she openly said her first night, Peter, that she came disagreeing with this, but something had been bothering her about this for years. And this was the first time she felt comfortable having this discussion. So that's been the major change, is that we are seeing people who originally disagreed, who are reaffirming their belief. And also it has allowed churches to start taking up active roles. A local church here invited me in for the last night to take some pictures for promotional materials. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the night, the pastor sat down with a group, and they realized that the pastor and a member of the congregation, who was a doctor, who was a member of our organization, were the only people doing pastoral visits. And this was mortifying to the group of people who had met. And so they set up a pastoral visitation committee. So they're going to visit people who are sick. And what they do now is call the pastor or the doctor. There's a specific concern. Also, they set up a bereavement committee so that when a funeral happens, they have goodies at the church after the service. And they also have this ongoing group of people who have recently suffered loss, who now meet together and pray together and work through that.
So you're really seeing lay people mobilized, aren't you? Perhaps with reference to the testimony you gave about this woman who changed her mind, What was it in the course that led her to reframe the whole way she looked at death, dying, euthanasia, and so on?
It came down.
A particular thing.
It came down to the understanding of the difference between intentionally killing somebody through euthanasia and the giving medication to somebody that may cause a death. In her mind, there was no difference. But as she learned the difference and what good palliative care should look like, and I think the other big thing she said afterwards was, this was a couple of years ago, was that she thought that by killing people, that this was a better way to deal with their suffering other than letting them suffering, where she realized that the biggest problem we have, particularly here in Canada, is that your experience of care is radically different if you're in a rural setting versus an urban setting. So you may get good palliative care here in Halifax or Dartmouth, as I'm located. But if you go an hour outside of where I am, there is very limited palliative care. And so this is an ongoing challenge in a country as big as ours, that you don't receive the same kind of care across Canada.
And there was that chilling story, wasn't there, about the woman who couldn't get support for housing, and we're hearing lots of stories like this coming out from Canada now. Do you think that the legalization of euthanasia in Canada has changed the culture? And it's often said that the sins of the culture are the sins of the church, and that Christians are often blind to those sins that are institutionalized within a culture. Do you think that the legalization of euthanasia and the growing acceptance of the practice has led to more people in the church just rolling over and accepting it?
Yes, and we were very quiet as a church when this was legalized. No church, and I would say one of the challenges of being a body of Christ that doesn't always work well together in between denominations, is that we didn't put up a united front on this topic. It's only been 10 years into this. So when the expansion of MAiD for mental health, which is on the books here in Canada, but has not been implemented and will not be implemented until closer to 2027, March of 2027, which is about 14 months away. We've started to see some pushback. But yes, I mean, there are very faithful Christians who would go to church every week that would tell you that there's nothing wrong with MAiD. And so one of the reasons we want to resource churches is part of what we do is we resource them to also preach about this on Sunday and teach about it, because many people don't know there's anything wrong with it. They assume because it's legal, it's acceptable.
Now, obviously, a big part of this, as you've laid out, is laying a really good theological framework and understanding really what Christianity teaches about death and dying and compassion and intentional killing and all these sorts of things. To what extent do you use scripture in the course? And can you give us a kind of framework of the sort of scriptural principles that you bring in when you're teaching about it?
So the course itself was designed by some theologians and medical professionals with theological backgrounds. And so we talk a little bit about what you do to the least of my brothers and sisters, you do to me. We talk a little bit about the hope of the resurrection. And the whole course is designed to explore that and to really focus in on the idea that every person is made in the image and likeness of God and therefore has important human dignity. And that dignity cannot be taken away from us, no matter our age or our ability. And there's a natural human bias, and it's grown in Canada ever since MAiD has come in, called ableism. Ableism is a huge problem where you're only valuable while you're useful. And it's something that we are pushing back against, because that human dignity that God gave us is so important, and to be honored at all stages of life and with all levels of ability.
Now, you talked about the audiences that you've used, and you say anyone who's concerned about these kind of issues, whether they're churches, they're healthcare professionals, they're people in care homes, including patients as well. To what extent do people have to be coming from a Christian worldview or biblical convictions in order to find a course useful? I mean, is it mainly for Christians, or is it for others who may not share our worldview as well? And what experience have you had in that?
So it's predominantly made for Christians, absolutely. But one of the unintentional consequences we've had is that we actually have had people who are not from a Christian background come and take the course, to the point that in the third video, we had to redo the end of the video where Larry will appear. It's the only time he appears in any of the videos. And he actually leads people through making a basic proclamation of faith, almost an initial conversion, because we've had people from non-Christian backgrounds come in and have had a tragedy in their lives and begin to explore this topic, and that leads them to Christ. I mean, I have a dear friend who is a retired pastor, and in his retirement years, he goes and visits people who are in nursing homes and in hospital. And he says there are very few atheists that he encounters in that setting. Whereas a pastor, he encountered them all the time. Now he usually deals with people who want to know who Jesus is.
Well, that's fascinating. Now, of course, the more euthanasia happens, the more conversation that happens about it, and particularly on the media and so on. And to what extent does this course equip ordinary Christians to be able to have conversations in these contexts? You know, mum at the school gate, or people in the lunchroom at work, or traveling together. Well, does it give people more confidence to answer the basic questions and arguments for euthanasia in a way that's really going to be convincing?
Yeah, that's been one of the things that we've gotten a lot of feedback on. So one of the Larry's background is in adult education, as well as a number of other things. And so we get reviews from every course, as many as we can get. The courses usually receive between 4 and 5 stars on every measurable. So about 4.3 is the average right now. And they always talk about how it gives them confidence in talking about the subject, but also a pastoral approach, Peter, because I think that's it's very easy to either have one of two extremes. Either you're very compassionate to the point that you're almost accepting of everybody's worldview, or you're so judgmental as a Christian that you turn people off, not because you're not telling the truth, you're just not speaking it with love.
Yeah. Oh, fascinating. Just a little bit on the practicalities now. You say you've got the course now with French subtitles, and you're planning to record the videos again in French. Do you have it available in any other languages at the moment?
At the moment, no. We have recently met with a Ukrainian group here in Canada. Larry did a workshop for a group of Ukrainians, and they offered to translate it. If we have somebody who would like to subtitle these videos, they're easily to be done. That's how we ended up with them in French. A group from Moncton, which is a little bit west of me, which is a bilingual province, the only bilingual province in Canada, in New Brunswick. They needed a resource. And so a gentleman there called me up, and it happened to be that he and his wife have a language background, and they offered to they did most of the basic subtitling, and then we ended up having a professional go through the videos and make some small tweaks. And yeah, it's become a necessity. But Canada is predominantly English and French. So English was the first one, because most of us speak English predominantly, and then French is our next goal, because we've had a huge demand in Quebec for this topic.
Yeah, and we'll pick up the conversation about that in more depth afterwards, Brad, because people will be asking about it. But we've just to say that we've certainly found here at ICMDA, where we operate in 7 main languages and others as well. But most doctors or dentists will speak one of the 7 main languages in the world. And with all our videos and teaching materials, once we have the script in English, then it's very easy just to download it, machine translate it, get it checked by skillful sense checkers, and then upload it again onto the video. And we've been able to do this very, very cheaply and very effectively. So this is something that could go much more widely, and we'll talk about that. The Walter Jacko here is asking, does Dying with Christ, Living with Hope have virtual trainings? You say you do some virtual virtual sessions for people over Zoom, but do you train trainers over Zoom as well.
So
I'm thinking
I
of
must.
people who might want to run it abroad.
Yeah, so the sessions I do virtually are designed as train the trainers. But
Yeah.
the way we do train the trainer is that for the first 15 minutes, I'll walk through some practicalities, so that even if you've never run anything like this before, I will make sure that you are 100% equipped to run something in any setting. Because most of my life was as a youth pastor, so I have run Bible studies in the most unique places you could ever imagine, and we do those quite regularly. Um, I'm just gonna, Peter, just for 2 seconds, I'm gonna bring my screen back up and place this back on the screen. So those are the upcoming sessions. And if someone were to go look at our website, we will constantly be updating those. And if my contact email is there, if there's a time that somebody would like to have it run, I don't mind either staying up really late or getting up early to ensure that somebody has access to this training. And then after we do the 15 minutes, we actually run through the entire session, similar to something like Alpha, so that you can actually experience it. Because it's one of the most challenging things. I will say from my own experience, 20 years in ministry, some of the most deep conversations I have ever had have been in these online sessions, because we're talking about things that are right at the edge of our experience of death and dying.
Yeah. So a few more on practicalities. So Veronica Yu is saying we're Christian Nurses, we're Nurses Christian Fellowship in Canada, she says. And I'm sure you know this group. So how long is the course, and how can we arrange this as a training for nurses in Canada?
We would love to have this. If somebody wants to reach out to me, we would love to work with you. The Nurse Fellowship has been very supportive. I've had members of the fellowship take the course. I have some friends that work in that organization and that I didn't even know worked in that organization. I knew them from my past life and as a pastor. So it'd be great to have some collaboration. And you can take the course. You can arrange the course through me. I am happy to do that. We also have those ongoing times. I'm going to try and put that in the chat as you answer the next question, Peter.
We'll put that. We'll give people references to that when we write to them as well, so people don't have to worry about that. So, someone's asking for your email address, but we'll set up a way whereby people can contact you securely through the website. Steve Hawthorne says, I'm a family physician in Chicago in the state of Illinois in the United States. Illinois just became the 12th of the 50 states to legalize MAiD. So far, there is little conversation in churches or newspapers or the clinics where I work around this change. You mentioned a course in Illinois to happen soon. Can you give more information about this one? So I think we'd say to Steve, just drop a note to Brad when you get the letter from us and connect with him, and he'll be able to give you more information about that specific course. Walter Joko from Kenya. I'm Walter from Kenya. I'm interested to know what the Christian doctor's response in Canada is. Can they decline to perform euthanasia for reasons of conscience? I know that the conscience issue is something that Larry Worthen's been doing a lot of advocacy about, but can you just frame that for us? Tell us, how big a problem is this for doctors with pressure being put on them, coercing them to participate? How easy is it for them to refuse to do that? And what are the consequences? And what is CMDA Canada doing in that whole area? So
one of the things that we are doing is that we are actively fighting a conscience battle here in Nova Scotia, where I'm located. So here's the issue. It was legalized nationally, but there were no conscience or standards that were set across the country. Each college, which is governed by each province or territory, actually dictates what the college policy is. And in Nova Scotia, we have one of the most problematic college policies anywhere in the world. So doctors are required to fill out referrals whenever they're asked, and they are supposed to notify patients whenever they may qualify. So whenever you may qualify for, you may be dying, you're supposed to tell your patient. So recently we had a young mother who is in her 30s, who was going in for a surgery that had a 99% chance of positive outcome. She ended up being offered medical assistance in dying through the paperwork that she was given. It's advertised in the last page. We had a patient also in our province about a couple of years ago. She went in for a double mastectomy. The first one was because there was cancer, and the second one was as a preventative. And she was offered MAiD 3 times during the course of her treatment. It's a huge problem for doctors here because right now there's this specter of a complaint here in Nova Scotia. There are some provinces that have very good, even okay college policies, but Nova Scotia is not one of them, unfortunately. So, and we're currently lobbying the provincial government, and we're having ongoing conversations about this because it is something that we are very deeply concerned with, Christian doctors being actively persecuted.
Are doctors in danger of losing their license to practice for not participating
in Nova Scotia, none of them have been disciplined yet. There have been threats, but they are definitely in danger of losing their licenses. And according to our policy here, that it's 2 strikes and you're out. If you get one sanction, then you would have to get special permission to leave the jurisdiction, and then after the second one, you could lose your license. And they live in. I would say the bigger problem is that they live in constant fear and anxiety, and in a profession where we are stretching our doctors very thin. We don't need to be doing this to people who are trying to do what's right for their patients.
No, absolutely. There's a few more questions here, which I won't put them to you because I think it's the same answer for each. People are just asking. Thomas Turbiak saying, "I want to bring the message to my community and church. How do I proceed?" Diana Hopeson is saying she's a musician and counseling psychologist and would like to have the materials to help Christians face death in Ghana. How does she start? And then Karen Patterson is asking from the UK, are any of your training courses accessible time-wise for UK participants? And I think with all of these, would encourage you and any others listening as well who have the same kind of questions to contact Brad afterwards. And when we do write to you after, we'll give you that access that you can make use of.
And I'd be happy to run a course anywhere in any time zone to make sure that people can get access to this materials, because it is an ongoing conversation, especially for you in the UK who are in the middle of this murky legal discussion that you're having.
Well, we've got a couple of bills here, one in the House of Lords in London, another one in the Scottish Parliament, that are currently at quite an advanced stage that we're working to stop as well. I wonder if we could just shift to the whole public square, Brad, and I know that you're involved very much in advocacy as well, not just training people in churches, important though that is, but also speaking, and I know that Larry does this as well, speaking on media, speaking to Parliament, and so on. You talked early on about how the real answer to this is the Christian gospel and understanding how Christ himself faced suffering and death, and how his death and resurrection give us a living, certain hope for the future. And I just wanted to ask, in the public square, how much can one use Christian arguments? Is it wise to argue from a Christian worldview? If so, what's the best way of doing it? And if not, what are the arguments that really cut it with people who might not share our faith convictions?
I would say that we have to get used to, as Christians in a post-Christian world, because I would even argue we're at this point, we're in a pre-Christian world, and we have more in common now with the church that you would experience in Acts than any other time in history. So we have to get used to pouring into the well. We live in a reality where there's a plurality of truths, and we have to pour into that well as well, using Christian ethics, but also that people don't always, can get iffy about Christian ethics. So sometimes they'll say things like, well, that's good for you, but not for me. You then can go back to basic ethical principles that we would call Christian ethics, but that still apply. I mean, things like, we see the value of a human life throughout its existence. That's a Christian worldview, but that's one that tweaks with people. One of the things that's very interesting is that even people who have no issue with MAiD, for people who are near death, have a huge concern about MAiD for mental health. 60% of Canadians who are in favor of MAiD 80% of those people also are now concerned about the expansion of MAiD to mental health in Canada. So even people who agree with MAiD are now looking for, well, that. The problem is that we know that it's the thin edge of the wedge. Once you allow MAiD for certain groups, you then have to, under rights, include all groups. In fact, that's how MAiD expanded here in Canada. Originally, it was only for people near death. And then people sued saying, well, I have an irredeemable condition, some suffering that I can't live with. So you need to allow me to have access as well.
Yeah, this is the whole pushing the envelope, isn't it? Or the slippery slope or incremental extension, whatever you like to call it. Once you accept the principle that you can treat suffering with a lethal injection, and once you've allowed it for any group of people at all, you inevitably open the door to extension to other groups. You start with the terminally ill, then it's the chronically ill. You start with adults, then it's children. You start with the physically ill, then it's the mentally ill. And you're seeing all of these things in Canada, aren't you, now that the principle of euthanasia has been accepted?
And more interestingly, Peter, I'll get you to your last question, is that we actually exclusively use lethal injection here in Canada. We have both tracks available, but because we legalized euthanasia by physician, that is actually it's so small. The percentage is less than 1% of people who have MAiD in Canada experience it by taking a pill themselves. It is pretty much only patient.
So you've seen a shift from once you accept assisted suicide, you then inevitably accept euthanasia as well, whether the difference being, of course, with assisted suicide, the doctor helps the patient to kill themselves, but in euthanasia, the doctor actively ends the life of the patient, and you're seeing it's the second category almost exclusively now. Yeah, really chilling. Just perhaps finally, because we're running out of time, I wanted to ask you about working together with others who share our convictions about euthanasia, but not our faith. And I'm thinking of the categories: disabled people, doctors who work in palliative medicine or oncology, people from other faith backgrounds, and so on. To what extent do you work with them in advocacy, and to what extent would people like this benefit from the kind of program that you're offering?
We work a lot with groups of people that you would be surprised, people who don't share a Christian faith. The lady whose story I shared with you about the mastectomy, she actually is a woman who doesn't practice, but a family member does, and told her about our advocacy work, and she reached out to us directly. And one of the most heartfelt conversations I've had since taking this job was her telling us we were the first group of people that ever listened to her. And I think in that way, we proclaimed the gospel to her without using any fancy theological terms. We were present to her. And so, yes, we work with our Muslim brothers and sisters, people who are ethically opposed. In Nova Scotia, during our advocacy work, we have 42 doctors who have signed on and said there's an issue with this. Some of them are students. Many of them come from pretty much every faith background, and some of them have no faith. And so we actively work with any group that would like to collaborate, because we've learned that the only way we can push back is together. And I think in a real way, this is also reuniting the body of Christ. And that is a big hope for me, and a big joy, something that I would love to experience. I went to a theological school, an ecumenical theological school. And one of the great joys of my life was learning how much we all had in common.
Perhaps just finally, last question. I had a good friend who was actually my predecessor as the CEO at Christian Medical Fellowship in the UK, Andrew Ferguson, and we both used to do quite a lot of advocacy and media work on this issue. But he was in a spirited debate on the radio once about euthanasia, and right at the end of the program, the atheist who was strongly in favor said, well, of course, what you think about this issue really depends on what you think about what happens after death. Because if death is not the end, I can see that you might have a different perspective than me. And then they went off air, And Andrew said he had one of the best conversations he'd ever had with a media opponent off air after the program. And just really a final word from you about how our belief in the death and resurrection of Christ and the new heaven and the new earth, and the fact that death is not the end, but just a pathway to a far more glorious eternal experience. How much is that? Is there an opportunity to talk about that, and how much does that shape the conclusions that we come to on this issue?
Peter, I think that is exactly what shapes us, and it should be something that motivates each of us to have these conversations within our spheres of influence everywhere we are. I always lived a life where I believed preach the gospel, always use word when necessary. And I really believe the best thing that we can do is to tell people about Jesus Christ, that Jesus Christ is Lord, that he is the Lord of the living and the dead, and that death does not have the final word, that life in the resurrection is the most important gift we can give people, and to continue these conversations. And one prayer that I say every morning before my feet hit the floor is, Lord, give me just one person today that I may share my testimony with, that I may witness to Christ for. And I live my life that way with the hope that when I get to the other side, that I will see many of my brothers and sisters, people whose lives that I don't even know that I did anything for, but that I will encounter them again. And that is the best thing that we can do. And I think that's something that we can all do no matter what our vocation is, no matter where we find ourselves in life. We can make Christ known particularly through what we do, but also when God gives you the opportunity, be not afraid. Give them your testimony. Tell them why you love Jesus and allow that to come through.
Amen. What a great note to finish on, and a great prayer to pray for God to open the door for opportunities like that. Brad, thanks so much for your time, your experience, your testimony today. This course, I think, is something that could go much wider than Canada, and we'll talk about that. We look forward to seeing you again soon, and may the Lord bless you. Thank you.